take one word from the Megillah, and we're going to see it in many, many, many different perspectives, many faces. We're told there are Shivim Panim LeTorah, 70 faces to the Torah. And here we're going to look at, well, it's actually two words, and we're going to see it through a broad spectrum. So what are the words we're talking about? Nahafoch hu. A lot of times we say it as if it's one word, nahafoch hu, but it's actually nahafoch hu. So what does this mean? Nahafoch hu means that the whole circumstances of the Megillah, Haman's whole plot, was turned upside down. Nahafoch is to turn something like totally in a different direction. And so these two words come at the end of the Megillah, after the whole war, and now they're establishing the holiday of Purim for all generations. So the Megillah says that Haman's plans were nahafoch. They were turned around. Everything that we thought was going to be this incredible tragedy turned out to be a joyous holiday. So I want to take this idea, and we're going to look at it from many different angles. So we'll start with Esther. That when we follow the Megillah from the beginning, Esther is very passive. She's taken into the harem of Achashverosh. We don't see her speaking whatsoever. She does what Mordechai commands her. She is taken against her will. She has, in a certain sense, a status of a victim. She's not in control of anything that is happening. And lo and behold, she's chosen to be the queen. And Mordechai says, just stay quiet, don't tell anyone who you are, and especially that you're a Jewess. And even when the story develops and Mordechai finds out the plans of Haman, genocidal plans, so he sends to Esther, you have to do something. This is probably why you ended up being queen. Now you could do something. And Esther's first reaction is, I can't just go in and see the king without being summoned. You could die that way. So up to this point, we see Esther as passive and as a victim in a certain sense. And then we see a nahafoch, an amazing nahafoch. Once she decides that she is going to have total mesirat nefesh, total mesirat nefesh, and go into the king and do her best to save the people. So we see a complete change in not only the story, but Esther herself. And she instructs, now she is instructing. Up to now, she hasn't said a word, and she's been the recipient of instructions. Now she instructs Mordechai to have everyone fast for her for 3 days and nights, and she will also. And then she'll go in to see the king. And we see from that part of the story, Esther takes over. Esther comes up with this plan to invite Achashverosh and Haman to the first Suda. And then at the first Suda, she invites them to the second one. I'm assuming everyone knows the story. My point is, there's an incredible nahafoch that Esther now is in charge. She is running the show. And even after Haman is hung, she gets permission for the Jews to defend themselves. She gets permission for the Jews of Shushan to fight for another day. She and Mordechai establish a new holiday in Israel. So this is, the whole story is really the nafochu that's happening within Esther. And of course, the book isn't named Megillat Mordechai. It's named Megillat Esther. And so this transformation in Esther is really the heart of the story. And in a certain sense, this is the secret of tshuva. This is our next perspective of nafochu. Turning things around, changing everything. I would say especially people who are watching, who consider themselves to be balei tshuva, those who at one point were perhaps very far away from Torah and mitzvot. And everyone has their amazing story where people change their entire lifestyle, their entire attitude, their worldview, their whole being. So tshuva, in a sense, is the ultimate nafochu. It really is. It's the ultimate nafochu. But even people who are born religious and have lived that way, we all come to different junctures in our life, or different mistakes that we make, or things that we regret. And so tshuva is not just for people who are far away. Tshuva, the Gemara says that kol yamav b'tshuva, that a person should see themselves as if all their days shall be tshuva, because tshuva, in essence, is returning to Hashem, returning to a deeper relationship with our own soul, returning to a deeper level of our relationship with Torah. So it says in the Gemara, probably everyone is familiar with this, an amazing statement where the Chazal say, if someone does tshuva from yira, from fear, their previous purposeful sins will become inadvertent. They'll be transformed and counted, as it were, as inadvertent sins. But if a person does tshuva from love, then their purposeful sins will turn into merits. So we could see something with Esther, a very interesting thing. Everyone asks, how does this work? How does retroactively, how can I turn my wrongdoing into merits? So the answer that is usually given, and it's a good answer, and it's a true answer, is that when someone becomes a Baal Tshuva, so because of previous misdeeds or mistakes or even purposeful sins, that this gives strength and fire and passion to not just do tshuva once, but to take on Torah and mitzvah with a tremendous hitlavut, with enthusiasm. And this is a very good answer, because we know even everyone can fall into rote and routine, even with the most holy things. Shabbos, I think we all know a little bit that Shabbos can fall into a certain amount of rote also. I mean, Shabbos is the most beautiful thing in the world, but sometimes we just start taking it for granted, and we do it, and we do it happily. but sometimes it doesn't have the same fire as it once had. So going back to Esther, we see something very, very interesting. Because in the beginning, it seems like it was somewhat of a negative or detrimental situation that Esther is in. She's taken against her will. She's silent. She's instructed not to reveal who she is, not to reveal her Yiddishkeit, and to just kind of go with the flow very passively. So it turns out, though, that when Mordechai says to her, who knows if it wasn't for this opportunity that you came to be queen? So all of a sudden, all the hiddenness of her own identity, her own passivity, now turns into a merit. Because had she revealed in the beginning that she was a Jewess, number one, she might not have been chosen to be the queen, and much worse things could have happened. So here we have an example of a previous situation which was somewhat like in the victim status. It turned out to be turned into a merit, because now when Esther takes charge, it's because she was silent before. So it's a very, very interesting idea. Hopefully we can all think in our own experiences, our own life, what actions that we took in the past that we regret or we wish we wouldn't, but somehow there's like a hidden blessing in that it doesn't become clear to us until much later. Okay, excuse me. So now we're going to go on to other types of nahafochu, and there are many. So we all know that Haman comes from from Amalek, and Amalek comes from Esav. So when Rivka is pregnant and she feels that the two embryos are like kind of fighting within her, she goes to the yeshiva of Shem and Ever, and she asks God, and through them they give an answer, and she's saying, well, what's going on here? And a very, very deep prophecy comes through that she's told that you have two nations in your womb, and the elder will serve the younger. And from this, Chazal say that when Esav is on the ascent, by definition, Yaakov will be on the descent. In other words, or the opposite, if Yaakov is ascending, then Esav will be descending. Because that's really what Rivka was told, that you have two nations, and they'll contend with each other. And when one is going up, the other is going down. So this is something that Zeresh picks up on. If you remember, Haman comes home from the first feast, and he's on a high. He can't believe that the only people invited to the feast of Esther were Achashverosh and him. And it shows how important he is. And the text says how wealthy he is and how many children he has and everything. And at that point, he's advised, well, now that you're on the top, go to Achashverosh and ask that Mordechai be hung. And that's what he did. Remember, he came and he's coming to him. And then it says, V'nadada Shinat HaMelech, the sleep of the king was disturbed. And that's when he gets up. Why? Achashverosh is jealous. He really, according to the different commentaries, even the simple meaning, Achashverosh really loved Esther and really valued her. And now he is jealous. Why is she invited Haman? And that's why he wakes up in the middle of the night. But who shows up right then? That is when Haman comes. But another Nahafochu, he asks for his book of remembrances. And then that's when he finds out that Mordechai had once saved his life and he never rewarded him. And that's when Haman comes in, and there's this Nahafochu that happens. And now Haman has to lead Mordechai through the street in great honor, and he's disgraced. So, but when he comes home and he tells his wife what happened, so you'll see in the Megillah, she says, if Mordechai is from the seed of the Jews and you've begun to fall before him, you will certainly fall the whole way. And this is exactly what Chazal said. Because when Haman was going up, Mordechai and the Jews looked like a really bad scene was about to happen. But once a Nahafochu happened, and now Haman is going down, and Mordechai is ascending. So that's what Zerah said. If you've started to fall before Haman, before Mordechai, you will fall the whole way. So this is another Nahafochu that happens in the story, but it's all the ways back to Yaakov and Esav. Because remember, Amalek, from whom Haman comes from, is from Esav. So now that we mention this, we'll add another Nahafochu, and this is the tree or the gallows that Haman prepared for Mordechai of 50 amma. And of course, in the end, he is hung on the same tree that he made for Mordechai. So again, this is a Nahafochu. And this is very, very connected to the number 50. 50 amma is a very high gallows. It's a very, very high gallows. And if we're looking at the literal storyline. So the number 50 is very, very symbolic. But one of the places where 50 appears is when we count the 49 days of the Omer. And the 50th day is Shavuos. So we're told, what are we supposed to be doing during these 49 days? So we're told that in Egypt, we had fallen to the 49th gate of impurity. And we want to get to the 49th level of purity in order to receive the Torah. So every day of the Omer, in a sense, we are trying to, through tikkun hamidot, through very, very practical improving ourselves, tikkun hamidot, fixing our characteristics, our personality, our psyche, our ego, that we exchange one level of impurity for a level of purity. And so the gallows of 50, here we see that Haman, who's let's say the epitome of impurity, is preparing these gallows to hang Mordechai, but in the end, he is hung on it. So we see that in a sense, there's a nahafochu, a whole process in the story itself of the impurity that Haman represented gets turned around completely, and Mordechai and Esther are on the ascent. Okay, now This is a Torah from Rav Ginzburg. It's an amazing, amazing Torah. It has a number of parts. So we're going to go through them slowly. So if we take the two words, nahafoch hu, so we could read it almost in a literal sense, is to turn around the word who. Nahafoch, the aspect of who. So what does that mean? So in the Torah, and actually this is in Parshat Kitavo, where we have what are called the blessings and the opposite of blessings. Let's call it the curses. And in that whole section, so God says, because we have lost our way, we have lost our faith, we are not observing the Torah and the mitzvot the way we should. So God says the words, haster astir et panai bayom hahu. In I will surely, double language, I will surely hide my face in that day, bayom hahu. And Chazal say, where do we see Esther alluded to in the Torah? Because we're told that everything, every person, every incident, every circumstance is alluded to somewhere in the Torah. You could go online now and like almost any major event that happens in the world, you'll find some website that shows what commonly is called the Bible codes, where someone will work out that the words or the names of the current incident can be found in the Torah. So the Chazal asked a long time ago, where is Esther? Esther comes approximately 1,000 years after the giving of the Torah. But where is she hinted to? So they quote this verse, haster astir, which is the root of the word Esther. But here it says, bayomahu, in that day. So we know that throughout Jewish history, and especially during the Holocaust, so we felt what's called hester panim, God's hiding, like double hiding in that day. So there's another verse that we say in the Aleinu every day. Bayom hahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. In that day, meaning when Mashiach comes, when the redemption comes, the name of God will be one. So here we have a nafochu from hester panim, from when God's face is hidden, to a future event, which God willing we will all experience in our lifetimes, where on that day, by Yom Hahu, then God's name will be revealed and will be one. But now we're going to go another step. Another step is when we fight Amalek. And we know that the whole story of the Megillah is the energy of Amalek. Amalek wants to destroy the Jewish people. That is the mentality, the goal of Amalek. We have many enemies during our history, but not all of them wanted to totally destroy the Jewish people. Amalek, that is who they are. And Haman, his intent was to destroy every single Jew that he could get his hands on. So in the story in the Torah, in Parshat Beshalach, when we actually fight Amalek with Moshe and Yoshua, and we are victorious, So God says, it says, Yad al Kes Ka, that God is saying, my hand, as it were, will be on the throne of God, that there will be a war with Amalek from generation to generation. And so Rashi points out, a very, very important Rashi, is that why does it say Kes Ka? Why not Kisei and Yud Ke Vav Ke? So he says that God is saying that until Amalek is wiped out of this world, my throne and my name will not be complete. So it's pointed out, Rav Ginzburg points out, that what letter is missing from the word kes? That it's not kisei, is an aleph. And what letters are missing from God's name, which is just a yud and a hey, which is the name of God also, but it's not the full name of a yud and a hey and a vav and a hey. So vav and hey. So if you take those three letters, the aleph, the vav, and the hey, it's the same word who. So Rav Ginzburg says that throughout history, in a sense, what we're constantly trying to do is nahafoch these three missing letters and to return them to their proper place. They're hidden now. Hester aster et panai b'yomahu. God's face is hidden. Well, we want to turn that around, and through redemption and through Mashiach coming, that the who, those three letters, will return to their proper place. Kisei, Yud Ke, Vav Ke. And it says in the book of Malachim that Shlomo Melech sat on Kisei Hashem. In other words, and there was 40 years of peace and the building of the Beit Midrash and the Shekhinah dwelling in the temple. And people from all over the world came to learn from Shlomo Melech's wisdom. And people came from all over the world actually to come to the temple. It was not only permitted, but you'll see in Sefer Malachim, when Shlomo Melech is dedicating the temple. So part of a long series of prayers that he prayed, he also prayed that the people from all over the world should come, and he asked God to answer their prayers. So this is taking these three missing letters, hidden letters, and doing a nafochu and returning them to the right place. So where is the right place? So there's a pasuk that says, Ki b'char Hashem b'tzion, Eva l'moshav lo. That God chose Zion, Eva l'moshav lo. It was the place that he had a passion for being in that place, to dwell in that place. So this is like the last piece of the puzzle here. So in that verse, Ki b'char Hashem b'tzion, Eva means to desire, to have a passion. This is God's passion, as it were. So if you look at the letters, it's the same letters as who, but backwards. Nafoch hu. Literally, the letters of the hey, the vav, and the aleph now become aleph, vav, hey. It was a nafoch hu. So first, God is hidden from us. But Rav Ginzburg teaches all the time that there are four levels of understanding why God created the world. And they actually correspond to the four letters of God's name. So we'll start from below, the last hey of God's name. And that is the concept of Ein Melech Belo Am. There's no king without a people. 100 times a day we declare Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, King of the universe. And so we have this concept that, as it were, for God to have or reveal this aspect, he needed a people. Ein Melech Belo Am. And then the Vav in God's name is that God wanted to bestow loving kindness. God is a loving, kind God, and needed a recipient. And so out of God's goodness, that's what it says, Chesed Kel Kol Hayom. The goodness, the loving kindness of God is all the day. And that God created the world from Chesed. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. A world of Chesed he will build. The first hey of God's name is that God wanted to be known. That this is a whole different level. It has very much to do with Rambam and his understanding of the essence of God and intellect. But this idea that God wanted to be known, but the highest level and the most enigmatic level is what's called V'hi taveh HaKadosh Baruch Hu liot lo dira b'tachtonim. That God had a desire, a passion to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. And that is this pasuk that we just learned. Ki bachar Hashem b'tzion iva lemoshav lo. God chose Tzion because he had a passion to have a dwelling place in it. So this is the ultimate na'afochu here, is that the word hu now becomes the opposite letters. And it's God's passion to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. I should just mention that this week's parsha is Terumah, and we're beginning the whole instructions to build a Mishkan. And one of the most important verses in the whole Torah comes in this parsha, where God says, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Make for me a mikdash, and I will dwell in their midst. And of course, the famous teaching, it doesn't say its midst, meaning in a physical mishkan, a physical building, but in their midst, in the heart and soul and mind of each and every Jew. That is what God wants to bestow upon us.